researcher's purpose of study. The sample and due to the fact that it is very hard to conduct a study on the whole target population, a sample is most commonly used, and this sample is derived from the population, and it is selected on the basis of being representative of the whole population.
Good, great, great. So we should understand that the sample is kind of a snapshot from the population, but it's not any snapshot, but it but it must be representative of the population out of which it was taken. Again, we talked about population, and we defined it in a particular way. That is, we said that it is a relative concept, meaning in a particular situation, a population could be a sample, but in another situation, it could be a population. What can you say about this? What do you still remember about it?
The case of census, where the population is the sample.
No, I didn't mean that, Hamza. We said that the word population or the concept population is relative. In one situation, we can consider it as a population, but from another perspective, from another vantage point, we can take it as what? As a sample, as a population. So depending from where we are looking at it, can you just elucidate this, explain this to me so I can understand that you got it right?
Sir?
Yes?
For example, if we are conducting a study on...
That's who? Who's talking to me?
Shuruk.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
For example, we are conducting a study on motivation of students. And we take a sample of, let's say, the students of the English department at Shuaib Dukkali University.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, the population is the whole body of students of the English department at Shuaib Dukkali University,
mm-hmm.
and we take a sample from it. And in another case, we might take the whole body of students of the English department at Shuaib Dukkali University, and the population would be the students of English departments in all universities in Morocco.
Okay, good. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. And if you still remember, the example I gave you was one in which I talked about maybe lawyers. And I said we can do a study about lawyers in Morocco. This could be a population, but of course you are not going to investigate all lawyers in Morocco because this is time consuming and demanding, and therefore you're going to be just selective. Select just a few representative individuals, and then you do your research. This is taking lawyers as a population, but we can also consider it, that is lawyers as a population in Morocco. We can also take it as just a sample if we look at it from the perspective from a regional perspective, that is the Maghreb or the Arab region or something of the like. So it's depending on the vantage point from which we are positioning ourselves that we consider the population as a sample or as a population. So this is again one of the important things that we need to understand. Population as a concept is a relative word, and it is flexible, it is pliant, depending on from where you are looking at it. Now, later on, having established an understanding of the difference between sample and population, we moved on to talk about the difference between target versus accessible population. What is your take again?
Sir?
Yes,
sir?
Please.
Mohammed, yes.
Yes, Mohammed, yes.
The actual target populations refers to the population that we seek to generalize, which is rarely available for us. For instance, I can give the example of the English department students of Moroccan University. While the accessible populations refers to the population from which the researcher is able to generalize. In this case, English students, we use English students of Shuaib Dukkali University Al Jadida to represent all the English department students of Moroccan University in relation to what Shuruk has
Okay, good. Right, right. I think that is clear, Kat. It's clear the difference between target and accessible. Target is that's the sample that you are aiming at, and the accessible one is the one that you are that it's convenient for you to get to. Okay, but again, when I use convenient, it doesn't mean that you are using convenient sampling. That is because as a researcher, depending on the funding that you have. If you don't have much funding, financially speaking, then of course you will have very few resources, and this will dictate the way you're going to go about trying to sample. So if you are well funded, then of course you're going to expand the sample. You're going to deal with, because you can move from place to place, you can contact people maybe even in different cities. But if you don't have such funding, then you're going to be modest and try to focus on a limited area, and therefore the accessible sample that you're going to get is going to be again limited. So this is the point behind the difference between target versus accessible population. Again, what can you say about random versus non-random sampling? And it would be good if I hear students whose voices I very rarely hear. Please.
Professor?
Yes?
In random sampling, all members have an equal and independent chance of being selected.
Mm-hmm.
While in non-random sampling, they don't. They don't have equal chances of being selected.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe I'm talkative. That's why whenever I would love to provide you with an explanation or a description. Just say keep talking and talking and talking. But when it comes to you, you are very, very brief. That is, you say just a few words and that's it, and then you close the door. Come on, guys. The floor is yours. Try to be as verbose as you can, okay? Because I need to get this feeling that you are in good command of what we are talking about. So please try to expand on your ideas. Okay, go ahead again.
In random sampling, we select participants not based on some criteria or based on our knowledge of the population. We choose them randomly, either through the table of random numbers, and in non-random sampling, the researcher chooses or selects participants based on either their previous knowledge of the population or based on their availability, the availability of the participants, whether they are the only participants available, or on some other criteria.
Okay, good. Now it's good, Tisan. Now it's good. Please, somebody else to step in again and try to say it in a different way. Same thing, the difference between random and non-random sampling.
Sir?
Yes, again, please. Yusuf, yes, go ahead.
Sir, random sampling is, we can say, likened or analogous to putting everybody into a hat and drawing out some, considering that each element or each, say, participant in the population has an equal chance of being selected. It requires that a complete list of every element in the population should be obtained.
Okay, good.
Sir, if I may, go ahead, Mariam. Go ahead.
Thank you, Hamza. If, for example, in random sampling, if we have a population that consists of 100 participants, each one of those participants, that is, each member might be selected to be in the sample, and in non-random sampling, the researcher selects from that 100 participants the individuals who met certain characteristics that he wants to or he is interested in his research.
Okay. But that's not always the case. When I aim at a particular set of characteristics, set of features that describe the people I'm gonna try to investigate. That is a special type of non-random sampling, and we call that what?
Stratifying.
No.
Simple
Non-random.
random sampling.
What was that?
Simple.
No, that's not random at all. I'm saying it's non-random sampling. When I have a particular set of characteristics that I want the individuals who belong to the sample I'm gonna select eventually to be characterized by. What is this? What is this? What type of
Purposive sampling.
purposive? By the name itself, you can get what the meaning is. That is, it's purposive. There is a purpose. You are selecting specific individuals because they have certain characteristics. And that's usually something we do when we are doing qualitative research, usually. Qualitative research.
Professor?
Okay?
It
Yes,
is
please.
also the case in stratified random sampling. We also select the participants based on certain characteristics that they have, and that increases the representativeness of the sample.
Okay, let's see. The others. Do you agree with what Mariam has just said? That is, does it also apply to stratified random sampling?
I think so, because when I was reading the chapter, I found that the researcher chooses those particular individuals to ensure that they have certain characteristics. Yes, Professor.
Yes, listen to this. Listen to this. I don't need to read the chapter. I don't need to read the methodology textbooks to talk about this because it's very basic. Very basic. Look, that's why I always invite you to provide me with thick description of whatever I'm asking you about to make sure that you understand what we're talking about. So now it's good because I realize that there is some misunderstanding that we need to do something about. Look, when we check the idea of random and non-random, random and non-random, what I'm talking about here is you have a certain profile and you are trying to look for individuals who meet up with that particular profile. When I do this, what is the first problem that crops into your mind? What's the first problem if I have a particular profile in mind, a particular set of characteristics, and I'm looking for individuals that meet up with those characteristics? What's that? Is it random? Bias, it's a problem. Bias. And if bias kicks in, we can no longer talk about random sampling. We are already into non-random sampling. And that's why I didn't agree with you when you said that in stratified random sampling, that is, we choose particular individuals. Now, let me go into that and try to show you where you have gone wrong. You said that in stratified random sampling, that is, we choose certain individuals. But when we talk about male and female, that is gender. Do we have other possibilities? We have male or female. Usually when we conduct research in the educational context, we are interested in males and females. There are other categories. That is, if you are doing media studies, critical discourse analysis, literature, and so on, other people talk about other categories of people. Okay, but in doing educational research, almost all research talks about male or female. Now, when I'm doing my research, when I'm trying to see the effect of a particular intervention, a particular program that I want to implement with a group of individuals to see whether or not it's going to be effective or not. Look, as I'm going about doing this, I realize at a certain point, that gender may be a factor that would differentiate between one set of scores and another set of scores. In this case, I would decide to take the same proportion of females and the same proportion of males as it is in the population. So in this case, I'm using stratified random sampling. Now, compare these two. For example, let's see, we just pick up some kind of research idea which I can give as an example. Suppose you are doing research on teachers' technology-related practices in the classroom, something of the like. This is just an example to make things clear. And I would like to do, let's say, a case study. What is is the sampling procedure that I may want to use to get to those individuals, those teachers who are known, who are reputed to use technology very often. Am I going to do it randomly? If I do it randomly, the chances are I'm not going to get only to those who use technology in their classrooms. I'm going to be dealing with different categories, those who use technology, those who don't use technology, and those who moderately use technology. But if I want to aim at a particular category of individuals, I need what? Purposive sampling. I'm going to ask people about teachers who do use technology in their classrooms, because I want to identify the classroom-based practices of this particular segment of teachers. So can you see the difference between what we mean by stratified random sampling and purposive sampling? Can you see the difference between the two now? Or it's still the same as before? What's that?
To be honest, it's confusing to some, because I can see in the slide that stratified random sampling is a type of random sampling and purposive is a type of non-random sampling. But when I think of them, those purposive and the stratified random sampling, it comes to my mind the same, that they share the same, the common characteristics or the same idea.
No, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. Well, to be male or female, that's neutral. That's neutral. That's natural to be a male or a female.
When we are talking about gender or age, this is stratified random sampling.
What's that? What's that?
Stratified. We use stratified random sampling. When we are talking about certain detailed characteristics, we use the purposive sampling.
That's the point. When you have, as I said, particular features that you are aiming at, that you are trying to get at, in this way, you need to use purposive sampling. There are others. You can use snowball sampling, reputation sampling. There are so many others. But the point is, you are trying to select a particular category of individuals. But with random sampling, that is, you are, for example, when you chose male and female, and you are trying to let's try to factor in this concept of gender into the example I gave you that is related to classroom technology related classroom-based practices. Now, suppose I'm doing this kind of research and I feel that the factor of gender is an important factor. Maybe males are using technology in ways that are different from females are using it. So in this way, I'm going to use stratified random sampling by taking as a sample. But again, here, I'm not doing qualitative research. Now I'm doing quantitative research. I'm going to try to take the same proportion of males and females for the sample as they exist in the population. Do you understand that? But what are those characteristics that I'm talking about if I'm doing qualitative research? It could be because they use technology a lot, or maybe I'm interested interested in the other way around. That is, those teachers who do not use ICT altogether in their teaching, and therefore I'm gonna go about asking people about teachers who are known not to believe in the potential of technology. So this is purposive. You have a purpose. But with stratified random sampling, that's not the case. That's not the case. And be careful. If I'm asking you this, or if you say it in a different context where, like the context I was talking about at the beginning of this online meeting, if you say that stratified random sampling, that is, you have a particular target of, that is a particular set of characteristics, and you want to choose your participants based on this, and it is still random, then it's a problem because you are contradicting yourself. Because the rationale driving the idea of random is for every individual to have an equal and independent chance of being selected to the sample. Do you understand this?
Yes, Professor, clear. Thank you.
Okay, good. Where are we now? So can you talk to me about the importance of, because why do we need to make this difference between random and non-random sampling, in your opinion? Why the difference between these two is important? Is it just because we want to say that we have two different concepts and that's it? Or maybe we need to go beyond that and say that these two concepts are pivotal, are salient, especially when we start doing a particular, when we move on to a particular step. What is that step if it holds?
Professor?
Sir,
Yes, please.
I think it depends. Choosing a random or differentiating between a random and non-random sampling helps the researcher to choose the best method depending on the nature of his or her population and the research question that he will try to answer.
Excellent, excellent. That is the answer. That is the answer. Okay. So the decision that you make on what kind of, let's say, tests you're going to use, hypothesis tests that you're going to use, depends on whether you have random or non-random procedure. So that is something that we need to bear in mind and never forget it. Now, let's now move on and talk about the different varieties of sampling procedures, those that are random and those that are non-random. As you can see, we talked about 4 different types of random sampling methods. The first one is simple random sampling. Can somebody please show me the steps, talk to me about all of the things that we need to do if we want to use simple random sampling? The floor is yours again.
Sir?
Yes, please.
In a simple random sample, as we said, every member has the chance to be an equal chance of being selected. And to conduct this type of sample, one can use many tools like random number generators or random list number generators or other techniques that should guarantee that the choosing of the participants is entirely based on chance, not any purpose.
Okay, good. But what is this technique that is most frequently used when we want to do simple random sampling? And the chapter talks about it.
Table of random numbers.
Okay, so that's it. A table of random numbers, and it is a very, very long list of random numbers. And I guess that you've read the chapter and you are already familiar with the procedure because it's so simple. That is, you try to take out of the population a specific number. You decide on the proportion that you're going to take from the population, and then you go to the table and you start doing that is the selection procedure. You take the first, and then you take the second. If it doesn't fit, you put it aside, and then you move to the next and the next and the next until you get the number of participants that you want to recruit for your study. Okay. Now let's talk about stratified random sampling. Yes, please.
Sir?
Stratified
random sampling is a sampling technique where the researcher tries to ensure the representativeness of some minorities that may be not represented in a sample if the sample is randomly selected.
Yes, good.
Sir?
Yes, please, go ahead.
This sampling method is appropriate when the population has, say, mixed characteristics, and a researcher wants to ensure that every characteristic is proportionally represented in the sample. So the researcher divides the population into subgroups or strata based on the relevant characteristics. Example, age range, gender, job role, income, or etc. from the overall proportions of the population. And then the researcher calculates how many people should be sampled from each subgroup. They should be sampled, they should be balanced. The samples from each subgroup should be balanced in the overall sample.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
That was it. Sorry.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to say something different, or maybe you want to add on what Yunus has just said?
Sir,
Yes.
if we, for example, if we have if there's a company that has 800 female employees and 200 male employees, and if you want to ensure that the sample reflects the gender balance of the company, the researcher needs to sort the population into 2 strata based on gender. Then you use random sampling on each group. The random sampling is used on each group, selecting 80 women and 20 men, which gives you a representative sample of 100 people. That's it.
Okay, yes, yes, good. But what is the procedure? How can I do it? How can I do it?
Sir. Okay, go ahead, Hamza.
Sir,
Yes.
I guess we have first to identify the accessible population. Then we have to find out the composition of population, and also this third step, we have to use also the table of random numbers. So this
good.
is the
Now
step.
that's a good step, Hamza. That's a good step. That's what I was waiting for you to say. That is, we need again this idea of a table of random numbers. But how are we gonna do it? That is, are we going to get only 1 table, 2 table? How this would be done?
According to stratas, 2 tables. Each one represents a strata
Good. So I want to take.
Subgroup.
Yes, remember the example given to you in the charter. That is, I want to take just 30% males and 30% females, which reflect the same proportion of these individuals in the population. Okay, so I would take 2 different tables of random numbers, and then start with the first one. When I get the 30% of males I'm looking for, then I move on to the second one, and I take the next 30% of females. In this way, I would bring them together and get what is called stratified random sampling. That is, the procedure is so simple, okay? There are no complexities associated with it. Now, what do we mean by cluster random sampling? Before I ask you this question, it is related to cluster random sampling, but let me go back to simple random sampling and stratified random sampling. There is a thread, there is let's say a rope that binds them together, these 2 procedures. That is, we use simple random sampling, and we also use stratified random sampling because there is a prerequisite that holds. In the absence of that prerequisite, we move away from these 2 procedures and we start dealing with different procedures. What is it? Again, that's something
access
that
to the whole population.
You need to have the list of every single individual in the population. If you do not have such a list, then you cannot use simple random sampling and stratified random sampling. You need to use something different, and that is exactly what we're going to talk about when we start dealing with cluster random sampling. The floor is yours again. Can you please talk to me about cluster random sampling? What is it?
Professor?
Sir?
Yeah. Yes, please.
It's similar to simple random sampling in that we, instead of selecting individuals, we select a group of individuals.
Yes. Although that was too economical. Okay. I always would like you to expound. Okay. Don't explicate. Don't explain. Explicate. That's who? Yunus?
The one before me was Chisam, and I'm about to say.
No, I know it was Chisam because you were the second to talk. Yes. Okay, go ahead, Yunus. Go ahead.
cluster sampling also involves dividing the population, as Ibtisam just said, into subgroups. But each subgroup should have similar characteristics to the whole sample. So instead of sampling individuals from each subgroup, you randomly select the entire subgroups. And the clusters themselves are large. You can also sample individuals from within each cluster using one of the cluster sampling techniques.
Okay. The chapter gave an example. Okay, can you talk to me about this example if you still remember it?
In schools, sir.
Yes.
When the researcher cannot have access to all the classrooms, then he selects a whole group of a whole cluster instead of individuals, and that cluster is the classroom.
Okay, let's take this as schools. Suppose in a district, like the chapter is saying, suppose it's a district where we have 50 schools. And I would like to take out of these 50 schools, I would like to take 10 schools. Those, of course, I should do this randomly. So the 10 schools I would eventually select would represent what is called cluster random sampling. If you still remember well, the author of the book warned us against an erroneous practice, something that is wrong to do vis-a-vis cluster random sampling. What is it?
Sir?
Yes?
There is a risk that we may choose an representative sample of the population.
Maybe that's when he talked about one of the disadvantages of cluster random sampling, but that's not the warning that I'm talking about. He warned us against sampling.
Sir, we cannot draw conclusions on the target population.
No, that's not that.
That researchers select one cluster and study the whole population of the cluster.
That's it. There are some researchers who are not aware of this. What do? They take one cluster, and because it is a cluster, they say that they are using cluster random sampling. That's not. That is, it's not, because you are taking just one cluster. Look, the power, the effectiveness of cluster random sampling, in the same way as simple random sampling. When we talked about simple random sampling, we said that we need to have a very large number of individuals. And out of that number of individuals, we select a segment, a sample that is representative. The same thing applies to cluster random sampling. If you do not have a good number of clusters, then you have a problem. If you have only 2 or 3 clusters, that is, you are not in a good position to say that you are using cluster random sampling. You should have, like the example, we have 50 schools. So when you have 50 schools, it's possible to select 10. But what if you have 5 schools? If you select 2, that's not cluster, because the what if those 2 schools that you have selected, I don't know, schools for special IQ students, then whatever methodology you're going to be experimenting with, and eventually saying that it has brought about positive effects, it wouldn't be attributed to the program that you expose the students to, but it would be attributed to the fact that they have high IQ scores. So that's the thing that we need to bear in mind when we talk about cluster random sampling. We need to have a very large number of clusters, the same way as we need a very large number of individuals when we use simple random sampling and stratified random sampling. Is that clear for everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now how about 2-stage random sampling? Now, what can you say about that?
Yes. It is a combination between it's a combination between cluster random sampling and individual random sampling. For instance, if the researcher decided to, he can decide, for instance, to select 25 classes randomly from the population of let's say 15 classes. Then randomly he's going to select 4 students from each class.
Okay, good, right. What else can you say?
Professor?
Yes, go ahead.
Just expand on Mohammed's point. It combines the two types of sampling, and it says that it selects the groups randomly, which is the cluster random sampling, and then selects the individuals randomly from these groups.
Okay, and what's the difference? What's the just to cue you into more insightful ideas? What's the difference between selecting first a group of a good number of clusters? It could be classes, it could be schools, it could be universities, colleges, whatever, depending on your research aim. And then out of those clusters that you've chosen first, you select a few individuals from each cluster. Okay, so this is what we mean by two-stage random sampling. What is the difference between this and you taking, let's say, 2 clusters and dealing with all the individuals in those 2 clusters?
It ensures that your sample is diverse enough to be representative of the population, because
Which one?
In the two-stage sampling. The sample is selected from many not a number of clusters that ensures that it is likely to be more representative than if it is selected from just 2 clusters.
Because we would fall back on the problem that I have just described to you. That is when you choose just 1 cluster or 2, and then you want to generalize the results. What if those 2 schools include only poor students, or maybe students who belong to very low economic background? Because usually schools that involve students from poor economic background, usually these individuals, they suffer in terms of learning. Okay, so what if you have selected this category of teachers? So whatever experimentation you're going to be doing is not going to be effective, because the results are going to be influenced by the nature of the participants that you have selected, and therefore we need to be careful. Now, I think we are done up with random sampling methods. Do you have any questions about this? Yes, please.
How is two-stage random sampling less time consuming than simple and cluster?
Did I say it's time?
It's in the chapter.
You asked the author of the chapter. I didn't say that. Okay, so look. Reading those sections where he talked about the advantages and disadvantages of these different types of sampling, that is, we can clearly understand that they are not convincing enough. That is, if there is a need for me to go for simple random sampling, am I going to be concerned with time constraints? If it is important for my research, I have to go for it. If the most important, the most legitimate type of sampling that I need to use is stratified random sampling, I need to use this type of, no matter what other concerns are there. So to say that two-stage random sampling is or isn't time consuming, and because of this I'm gonna use it or not, this is not a good reasoning. Okay, this is not a good reason. So I don't agree with the author when he says that is when he differentiates between these 4 different types of sampling based on whether they are demanding or not demanding. If there is a need for each one of them, you have to use them no matter what. Okay, this is what you need to take away with you as far as these 4 types of random sampling are concerned. Okay, is it clear, Tisa?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, good. Now, let's move on to non-random sampling methods. Let me tell you these guys. The first one is tricky. Systematic random sampling. Systematic sampling. I said random because I have a reason. I'm going to explain to you why I said random. So systematic sampling, it's tricky. Can you tell me why is it tricky? And again, this is something the chapter talks about.
Sir, it is tricky in the sense that it can result in obtaining a random sample as opposed to a non-random one.
So if it gets us to random sampling, is it positive, negative? What do you think about that?
I think it's positive because it increases representativeness.
Okay, right. So that's what I'm talking about. And I had this slip of the tongue when I said systematic random sampling, because if you read other methodology textbooks, you might find that they are talking about systematic sampling not as non-random but as random sampling, and they are right. And to talk about systematic sampling as non-random is also right. But what is this determinant? What is this benchmark that we need to observe when we make decisions about whether systematic sampling is random or non-random? What is the thing that we need to pay attention to say this?
The list.
Good. What about the list? Explain further. Yes, please.
Maybe because this systematic sampling has a random start, as mentioned in the chapter, in the sense that every 10th or 20th or 30th name in the population is selected for inclusion in the sample.
But wait a second. When the chapter says that it had, that it had a random start, what did the author mean by that? Is it because we have this idea of every nth, that is every second, every third, every ninth? Is that what he meant?
This is what I.
Yeah. Is it Hamza?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
We have a list of all the population, all the accessible population, and the starting point from which the sample will be systematically selected is random. It is randomly selected. For example, the list will randomly pick that the start from which the sample will be selected is number 7.
You use Hamza. Use the appropriate terminology. What's that? What's that you're talking about? Your answer is good, is right, but you use the thing that you need to use to describe this to us. Can you please help your friend? That is, if he doesn't remember this, just step in and help.
I believe that's the sampling interval.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the sampling interval. Okay, that's what Hamza is talking about. Hamza, if you still have something to say, you can continue.
No, sir. That's systematic random sampling. Systematic non-random sampling is random in the sense that it has a random start.
And what is this random start? That was my question to I guess Shorok. I guess what is this random start? It is what you described to us. It is the selection of the sampling interval. Because suppose you take numbers from 1 to 10. You put them in a hat, and then you select a number. That number is gonna be what we call the sampling interval. It could be either the second, the third, the fourth, or whatever. Okay, so this is what we mean when we say that it has a random start. But later on, it's quite different. Now, you still haven't answered my question, which was what is this denominator that we need to observe when we make decisions about whether systematic sampling is random or non-random?
Whether the list is representative of the population or not, because the list may not be organized in a way that may not ensure that the sample is representative if we take interval sampling into consideration.
Good, Hamza, good. Yes, right. I'd like somebody to try to explain this further. But what Hamza is saying is good, is right. That's the answer.
Professor?
Yes, please.
The chapter, I think, named this idea periodicity, which is the potential pre-existence of a pattern that can bias the sample and alter the results.
So if we have this problem, is it random or non-random?
Sir, it becomes non-random because
I said it when I said what is the problem, because when you say problem, it's not non-random. When it is random, we have no problem, because the best of all is to have a random sample. That is a random sampling procedure. Because why is it important? Remember, because it's key to the representativeness of your sample. And the more representative the sample is, the chances are that the conclusions you're going to draw are going to be sound and well grounded. Okay, so this is it. Random is good. Non-random, then you're going to start having certain problems that you need to do things about. We're going to see what we can do later on. Okay, so if the list that you have of the individuals of the population is ordered in a specific, according to a specific pattern, based on achievement, based on IQ, based on aptitude, based on a particular parameter. In this case, if you use systematic sampling, then you are using systematic non-random systematic sampling. But suppose you list the names of the individuals, the names of the participants alphabetically. Would this be random or non-random? Hello?
Professor?
Yeah?
I think it would be
yeah. Hadik. Yeah.
I think it would be non-random.
Come on. No, it's random.
How is that, Professor? Because the raw data is manipulated. It is ordered.
So just let me ask you this question. Because the answer to this question is going to resolve the problem. When you arrange a list of participants alphabetically, the question is, where is my bias? Where am I biased here?
Sir, I think to the alphabetical system of that language that you are using.
What's that?
To the alphabetical system. Maybe, for instance, if you conduct a research in America, for instance, they have an alphabetical system that is different from, let's say, Arabic or something, like the order. It's different.
Mohammed, it's good, but that's not the issue. The question is straightforward. If I order, okay, let me put it again in this way. Suppose we are doing darts. Are you familiar with darts? I'm using a Moroccan Arabic term because I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we want to decide on that is turns. That is who's gonna get it first, who's gonna get it second, third, fourth, etc., etc. If I say, well, I think that Hamza is gonna get it first, then we go to Ibtisam, then Hamza, then Muhammad, etc. Would you accept that? Don't take this as coming from your teacher, because if I say it, you would, out of respect, you're gonna say it's okay. But if a friend of yours, you're just friends, I'm talking about this, would you accept somebody to do this? That is to impose who's gonna get it first, second, third, etc.
No.
And how about we do it alphabetically? I would say, look, we're going to list our names alphabetically, and those who are first, those are second, third, and so on and so on. Would this be fair for everybody? Would this make everybody happy? So if it makes people happy, so there is no bias. So can you see my reasoning?
Professor?
Yes, please.
I think by doing that we are one step further than achieving a raw data.
What do you mean?
Our raw data is data that are not manipulated. When you order a list alphabetically, you performed an act of manipulation.
Okay, let's put it again this way. what is the difference between a list of alphabetically arranged participants' names and a table of random numbers? What's the difference?
Sir, in some cases there might be the alphabetical order might have some socio-economical implications to it, and the last names, for example, may carry some socio-economical power to them, and therefore may distort the data.
No, but the question is, what has all of that to do with what we're talking about with this idea of bias? Because you need to identify bias. You need to say that this is the bias. If you arrange a list of individuals alphabetically, you are biased, and this is why you are biased. That is, if you can convince me of this, then it's okay. I would let's go of it. Look. I would say this in jest. That is kidding, just kidding. If you have already observed, my name is Ziyad. That is my surname, Ziyad. And the problem, as you can see with Ziyad, is that it begins with Z and then Y. That is, my name is not Z-I, but Z-Y. And Z and Y are at the bottom of the alphabetical order. The problem is whenever my name is listed, maybe on a platform that is on the institution where I work, that is in Shibtkali University institution platform, or in a conference program, or in a book that we publish and so on, my name is always at the bottom. Now, what can we take away from this? If the procedure is repeated, if you are a member of a fixed institution, and this institution always adopt this idea of alphabetically arranging words, then it would be unfair to me. But the participants in a study, you are not going, for example, I did research on a particular phenomenon, and I selected a particular sample of participants. That is, the next time I'm gonna do a different type of research. Am I going to use this the same type of kind of sample that I used in the previous a piece of research, or I need to start anew? Did you get what I'm saying? Hello. Is this silence? Is this silence? Is this silence emblematic of disagreement or of lack of understanding? What is it exactly?
It's time for absorbing. For absorbing.
Okay. I guess somewhere, I don't know, I don't remember this well, but I guess the chapter somewhere mentions this. Let me just scroll all the way down to where this is, and I hope that we have it just to settle this matter, because you believe the author more than you believe your teacher. So let me just scroll down.
No, it's not true.
Okay, where is that? Did I move over systematic?
It is in page 96, systematic sampling, line 9.
Look here. This is what I'm talking about. I've already highlighted it. Can you see that?
Professor, we can't see. I
Yes.
can
All
see.
of
I
you?
too.
All of you?
Cannot see.
We
I'm
see the
Me too. I cannot
We
see.
see just the document
The
that
document.
has all the PDFs. We don't see the
PDF.
You can't see the chapter?
No.
Okay,
No,
I'm going to get
unfortunately.
out and in again. I'm going to get out and in again and see
Okay,
whether that
perfect.
works or not. So no, this is not the thing that I would like to display. How about now?
Now we can.
Now we can see inferential statistics.
Look. Okay, you can open the chapter on sampling, and you go to page 98. Go to page 98. just to fill in the gaps, it was not to leave the silence reign, the discussion that we are having. Look, arranging names of participants alphabetically can be a problem in one particular situation. Suppose I have let's limit the list of individuals that we're talking about. Suppose I have a list of 10 participants. And again, suppose that I know that certain individuals' names begin with A, others' names begin with B, others with C, and so on and so forth. I know all of that. And I know their characteristics. I know those students whose names begin with A, maybe they are high-achieving students or low-achieving students, depending on the research that I'm doing. And because I know all of that, I insist on arranging them alphabetically. This is what we mean when we say bias. In this way, I am biased. In this way, I am biased.
So that's exactly the situation I had in mind.
But you need to have that in mind. That is, you need to be aware of the names of the participants and who those participants are. If you do, then it's clear that's bias. That's bias. But if you don't know, who is who, then arranging names alphabetically, I think is fair. I think is fair because there is no bias. And we don't have this problem of whether the data is raw or not raw. And I don't think that's the issue. Okay. Okay, so let's spend no more time. So just take it out of my mouth. If you arrange names alphabetically, I think that's random. They are randomly listed and not including or involving some kind of bias. Okay, if you do that, you are still within the realm of random sampling. Let me again scroll all the way up. You still don't see the.
We still see inferential.
So we see the inferential statistics page.
Okay, let me do this. Let me just remove this this one, and no, not this way. Okay, let me go. I think that you must see it now. I guess now you see it 100%.
Yes, sir.
The thing is that at the beginning of the meeting, I uploaded the one on inferential statistics, and I only later on I put up the one on sampling, and I didn't realize that. That's why you continue to see only the one on inferential statistics instead of the one that I'm talking about. Okay. So I think we are done up with systematic sampling. I think if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. If not, we can move on to convenience sampling. Is there any questions that you need to ask me about systematic sampling?
For me, no, sir.
Okay. Now, convenience sampling. How about this? What is convenience sampling?
Sir?
Yes, please.
Convenience sampling is, of course, a type of non-probability sampling that includes the sample that is drawn or being drawn from the part of the population that is close to hand, that is available to the researcher.
Good. What else can you add?
For example, a researcher can, in doing a survey, can stand at a mall or a grocery store and ask people to answer questions that are of interest in his or her study. This is a type of convenience of a convenience sample.
Good.
Professor?
Yes, Mariam, yes, go ahead.
like to add to Yunus' point that this type of sampling is considered as non-representative of any population, even that the individuals that are chosen or participate in the study are chosen due to their availability, not
Good.
in.
Good. And we have to understand something here. It's not because it is a decision that you make as a researcher. That is, I don't know, I like this idea of convenience and I'm going to employ it. It's not that it doesn't work this way. Sometimes the circumstances oblige you to have convenience sampling as the only option available. And that is what usually happens, because if it is possible for you to do random sampling, why opt for something that is inferior? Why opt for convenience sampling? And therefore, sometimes, most of the time, this kind of sampling is befitting, suitable when you want to do research in a particular school. Suppose you want to do research in college, that is at university. Are you going to go to the administration and ask them, I don't know, to provide you with a list, and then you enter the list and you make the arrangements you want to make, and then the administration would provide you with further help to rearrange the students in 2 different classes or more than 2 different. This is fictional thinking. That is impossible to happen.
Idealistic.
Impossible. Sometimes you ask them for very simple things and you find lots of issues. Okay, so sometimes it's the only option that you have available. Okay, but again, later on we're going to talk about things you can do to reduce, because when you do convenience sampling, there is bias. Here we're not talking about eliminating bias, but reducing, mitigating bias. Okay, so that's what convenience sampling is all about. How about purposive sampling?
Purposive sampling is when the researcher selects the sample based on predisposed criteria that the researcher sets before conducting the research, and that would and the sample therefore would serve the purpose of the researcher rather than being randomly selected.
Very good. So this is as opposed. Remember, I'm talking here to Miriam. Remember, this is a basic difference between stratified random sampling and purposive sampling. Because if they were the same, we wouldn't have 2 different namings for them. Okay, so purposive sampling, you have something in mind. You have a particular chart that depicts the exact characteristics of individuals that would be good informants for your research. In this way, you are going to be.
For example, sir.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
For example, sir, it is done when sometimes you have a large sample participate in one of your tests or questionnaires, and then based on the results or based on the answers of the respondents in a questionnaire or the results of a test, you select a narrower sample to based on certain characteristics to interview, to have in-depth knowledge about their experience or whatnot.
Good.
Especially when you have quantitative, a mixed method research.
Good, Yunus, that you mentioned the idea of qualitative research and also the idea of the interview. Purposive sampling is one of the best options that you have when you want to conduct interviews, because usually to do interviews you need a limited number of individuals. Okay, so this is what purposive sampling is about, and it is non-random. It is non-random. Let me see. This question just in passing, and then we continue with the rest. When we talk about sampling, here, it's related to what exactly? What type of validity is of concern to us when we talk about sampling?
External validity.
Good.
External validity.
Okay, remember this, very important again. That's what we mean by external validity. Meaning generalizing the result. That's right. Okay, that's good. So if you have a problem in your sampling procedure, that is going to affect the external validity of your study. And when we talk about internal validity, what does that mean? Again, that's something we talked about oftentimes. What does it mean? In what situation would we have this problem of a threat to internal validity?
When the methods selected are not
Inappropriate.
yes, are inappropriate for the research questions.
Look. What you said is good, but you talked about it from a certain perspective. But it makes me really happy. It delights me when I see that you are using specific words to talk about specific concepts. When we talk about internal threat to internal validity, we need to mention an important keyword. What is this important keyword?
Sir, confounding variables.
Okay, you are already on the right track. What else? What is the word? If you have confounding variables in your research design, then what is the problem?
That threatens your internal validity.
And what does that mean?
There could lead to alternative explanation.
That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, Tisa. That would lead you to have an alternative explanation for your data. That is, you want to say, because you tested the hypothesis and you wanted to say that your intervention has an effect, but in fact it's not the intervention, it is something else. That something else is the alternative explanation. And if you have this, then you have a problem of internal validity. You have a threat to internal validity. Now, what else? What do we mean by this idea of, I think we're going to close by this, and I'm not going today to talk about inferential statistics because we are already 1 hour and a half in this meeting, and we don't want to start again inferential statistics and not be able to finish it over, to finish it off. When we talk about ecological generalizability, what does that mean?
Sir, that we can have the same results repeated in different geographical conditions.
Okay, good. Excuse me, just I want to relate this to population generalizability. Population generalizability is exactly the thing that we've been talking about so far. That is when you take a sample from a population, you collect data, analyze it, and then you try to generalize the results that you obtain, the outcome of whatever intervention, whatever relationship that you've been investigating. You want to generalize all of that to the population. That is what we mean by population generalizability. How does that compare with economical generalizability? Now, the floor is yours, Mohammed.
Yes, sir.
Did you want to say something?
Sir?
No, I have answered the question. You said, what do you mean by ecological generalizability? I said it's the ability to having the same results in different conditions, different geographical conditions.
Okay, yes, good. Yes, what else?
Ecological generalizability is whether the results obtained, whether the population generalizability can be applied to larger population and to a population where the conditions that were set for the studied population are different.
Good. So that's a good start. So you're talking about the setting. You're talking about what is the other thing? The conditions, the setting and the conditions. And when we talk about the setting and the conditions, here we are talking about the ecology of the study that you are doing. Those conditions that surround the study that you've been doing. Okay. Give me a concrete example. Something that needs to hold across contexts, and we would have the same type of result. That is, if we make a change in that particular parameter, that is, we may not, that is, in that particular ecological parameter, we may not get to the same result. What is this thing? Give me one or two examples, if you can.
Sir?
Yes?
The article talks about the rural versus urban distinction, and that, for example, a research done on in an urban area may not be generalized to include all the possible areas because it doesn't account for rural areas.
Okay, and with that answer, we're gonna bring this meeting to an end. Great answer, Hamza. That is, if we take a study that we did in an urban area, in a city, we know in a city things are quite different from what is happening, what is going on in a rural or a suburban area. And therefore, that is, when you want to generalize your results, you need to take account of this idea of the ecological generalizability, whether whatever outcome that you got to in your study can obtain, can hold, can apply to other settings, like as we said, as Hamza said, in a rural area. That is what we mean by ecological generalizability. So, guys, if you have any questions, do ask them. If not, enjoy. Any questions? By the way, before I give you the chance to ask me questions, maybe we still have a couple of meetings, maybe two weeks from now. We're gonna just bring this semester to an end. Okay. About 2 days ago, I had a phone conversation with Professor Regig, who is the coordinator of this master's program, and we decided that we still have 3 sessions, including this one. Okay, so we still have two more meetings to go, and after that, it's over. That is, we're gonna start planning for the exam. Do you have any questions in this regard?
Yes, sir. Which should we submit the task you have given us about different topics?
I didn't get the first part of your question. Could you please repeat that?
The deadline of the task that you have given us of different topics. For instance, I have to work on experimental versus quasi. Yes, the term paper.
Let's say 1 week before the exam, or 2 days or 3 days before the exam. That's not really something that we need to be concerned with. Okay, so you have plenty of time to go. Plenty of time, no problem. Okay.
Sir, another concern, please, is that while we are learning a lot from a theoretical standpoint, we do not have the chance to apply what we learned for.
Unfortunately, Hamza, I can understand. Unfortunately, the trouble that the spread of COVID-19 has brought, not to us, but to the whole world, has caused a lot of change. That it was really transformative. You have to remember that when we started doing e-learning, when we started doing online meetings, we only have 1 hour and a half. That is, we don't have plenty of time to apply whatever we're talking about. That is, if we continue to have face-to-face meetings, then I would be there. I would be teaching you how to use data and input it into SPSS, or how you can do it into Excel, how you can process, how you can interpret the results. But unfortunately, as you can see, this is a calamity that we can do nothing about. Okay, to be honest with you, I don't have a satisfactory answer for you, but this is it. This is how things are.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Professor, what about the exam?
What do you mean by what about the exam?
When will it take place? What format will it be?
Questions, maybe a couple of questions, or 2 questions plus the definitions of terms, something like that. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, it would be satisfactory for me. It would be adequate for me if we just limit ourselves to the assignments I give you to read and summarize over the weeks, and also the assignment that you've been doing over the semester. For me, that's enough. But the administration always need proof of examination, and therefore I have to abide by the regulations. But if it were for me, I would content myself with the assignments that I've been giving you so far.
So, sir, the assessment is going to include all of this, all the participation, the paper, the assignments, and the final exam.
Sure.
Sir, how many assignments are we left with?
I guess 2, because we still have to. If you want, next time, because next time we're going to talk about inferential statistics. Okay, if we could finish talking about inferential statistics, it's okay. If not, we're going to continue to do that in the week after the next. Okay. If we finish talking about inferential statistics next week, then we leave the last week for, I don't know, general discussion, a review, revisiting most of the things that we've been dealing with in this semester. Okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Perfect.
That's it.
Professor?
Yes?
Is there any problem if we were not able to submit the assignment on time?
Okay, look.
Yesterday I was late, like 2 hours and a half or 2 hours, 20 minutes late.
Look, it's fine for everybody. It's fine for everybody. It's only because we are in special circumstances. I wouldn't accept that if we were in normal circumstances. But because we are in special circumstances, I can accept all of it. There is no problem. Just what is most important is for you to be safe, okay, and happy.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You too.
It's okay. It's
Thank
okay.
you,
So
sir.
bye-bye.
That's very considerate.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Have a nice.